At a recent dinner, my sister mocked me, asking how it felt to be the most useless person there. I was stunned by the question. As Rachel Wilson, a 34-year-old woman, I've always been the go-to person for my family's needs. Everyone sees me as the strong, reliable Rachel who has her life together. But last Sunday at our family dinner, when my sister Melissa smirked and asked, "How does it feel being the most useless one here?" something inside me finally snapped. Despite having paid her mortgage, our parents' medical bills, and supporting everyone for years, I was somehow labeled as useless. Before I tell you what happened next, please let me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever felt underappreciated by your family. My relationship with my younger sister, Melissa, was complicated as we were growing up. She was born 3 years after me and was always our parents' favorite. They doted on her while holding me, the older sibling, to a higher standard. Initially, I didn't resent this dynamic. It felt natural that the firstborn should be more responsible. Our childhood home didn't have many material possessions. Our dad worked as a local mechanic, and our mom was a waitress at a downtown diner. They made enough money for food and clothes, but luxuries and vacations were rare. This financial situation affected my sister and me in very different ways. Witnessing my parents stress over bills and work extra hours gave me a deep appreciation for financial security and independence. By the time I was 16, I was working part-time at a grocery store, diligently saving every dollar. School became my path to a better life, and I studied relentlessly, earning a scholarship to State University where I majored in finance. College was tough. I balanced my classes with 2 jobs, often surviving on ramen and coffee. My social life was practically non-existent, but my focus was on a bigger goal: stability. Meanwhile, Melissa chose a different path. While I worked double shifts during summer breaks, she was out partying with friends. When I was applying for internships, she dropped out of community college. Our parents worried about her but always made excuses. "She's just finding herself," Mom would say. "Not everyone knows what they want right away like you do, Rachel." After graduating, I secured an entry-level position at a financial consulting firm. The starting salary wasn't great, but it offered potential for growth. I shared a cramped apartment with 2 roommates, brought my own lunch to work, and continued to live frugally. Within 3 years, I got my first significant promotion, and that's when the cycle began. One night, Melissa called me in tears, saying she couldn't pay her rent. She had quit her retail job because her manager was totally unfair and needed just a little help until she found something better. Without hesitation, I transferred the money, believing it was what a big sister should do. I didn't realize that this would become our new normal. Melissa's emergencies became more frequent and costly. A car repair, overdue utility bills, credit card debt from a shopping spree she claimed was for job interviews. Each time I convinced myself it was temporary. Then, at 27, she started her first business venture, a handmade jewelry boutique. I contributed a large portion of my savings as startup capital, swayed by her enthusiasm and business plan. 6 months later, the store closed. Melissa blamed the wrong location, a bad economy, and unreliable suppliers. It was never her fault. 5 years ago, our parents' health started to decline. Dad's back problems from decades of mechanic work required surgery, and Mom developed hypertension that needed regular medication. Their insurance covered some costs, but the deductibles and copays added up quickly. Without any discussion, I stepped in to help. Last year, Melissa lost her job at a marketing firm. She claimed she was laid off due to budget cuts, but I later found out from an acquaintance that she had missed deadlines and argued with clients. By this time, she was married to Greg, a sales representative who apparently didn't earn enough to support their lifestyle. They had bought a house they couldn't afford, relying on bonuses and promotions that never came. When they faced foreclosure, I couldn't stand the thought of my sister being homeless. I agreed to cover their mortgage payments for just a few months, while Melissa looked for a new job. Those months turned into a year, and my resentment grew with every bank transfer. Despite the financial strain, I continued to advance in my career. Long hours and dedication paid off when my boss chose me to lead a major project for an important client. The project's successful completion would likely lead to another promotion and a significant raise. I poured everything into it, working weekends and evenings for months. 2 weeks ago, my team presented our findings. The client was impressed, and my boss pulled me aside afterward to tell me I was being considered for a director position. It was the validation I had worked so hard for. I wanted to share this news with my family, hoping they would finally see my career as more than just a source of money for their problems. That's what led us to last Sunday's dinner at our parents' house. I hadn't told anyone about the potential promotion yet, saving it as a surprise for when we were all together. I arrived early to help Mom, hoping the evening would be a pleasant celebration rather than another Rachel to the rescue episode. Little did I know that Melissa had her own announcement planned, one that would push me to my breaking point and change our family dynamic forever. The smell of Mom's pot roast filled the house as I helped set the dining table. Mom had always been an excellent cook, and family dinners were one of the few traditions we maintained despite our busy schedules. The familiar scent brought back memories of happier times before money and resentment complicated our relationships. "You're a lifesaver, Rachel," Mom said, handing me a stack of plates. Her hand showed signs of arthritis, the knuckles slightly swollen. Melissa texted, "She's running late as usual." Mom smiled indulgently, as she always did when talking about my sister's habitual tardiness. Dad was in his recliner, watching a baseball game with his walker nearby. The back surgery had helped with the pain, but his mobility was still limited. He perked up when he saw me. "There's my successful daughter," he called out. "How's work treating you?" I felt a flash of warmth at his interest. "Actually, I have some good news to share when everyone's here." "Can't wait to hear it," he replied, turning his attention back to the game. By 6:30, we were still waiting for Melissa and Greg. Mom kept checking her phone, worried the food would get cold. When they finally arrived 45 minutes late, Melissa breezed in without an apology, shopping bags in hand. "Sorry, traffic was insane," she announced, kissing Mom's cheek. Greg followed behind, nodding at me awkwardly. He knew about the mortgage payments. Melissa had made it clear she handled their financial matters, but he still benefited from my generosity. Melissa looked stunning as always, in a new dress I was sure she couldn't afford. Her hair was freshly highlighted, and her nails were professionally manicured. These observations only fueled my growing frustration. "Let's eat before everything gets cold," Mom suggested, ushering us to the table. The conversation flowed easily at first. Dad talked about a classic car restoration project he was following online since he couldn't work on cars himself anymore. Mom shared neighborhood gossip. I discussed a new restaurant I had tried downtown. It felt almost normal, like the family dinners I wished we could have regularly. As we finished the main course, Melissa cleared her throat dramatically. "I have exciting news," she announced, reaching for Greg's hand. My heart skipped a beat, thinking she might be pregnant. That would complicate matters further, but I'd still be happy for her. Instead, she launched into a detailed description of her latest business idea, a lifestyle coaching service for professional women seeking balance. She had already created social media accounts, designed a logo, and planned to rent office space in an upscale part of town. "It's going to be amazing," she gushed. "I've been researching this market for months. These women will pay premium prices for the right guidance." I noticed my parents exchanging glances. They had heard similar pitches before. "Sounds interesting," Dad said cautiously. "How are you planning to fund the startup costs?" Melissa's eyes flicked to me briefly before she responded. "Well, that's something I wanted to discuss tonight. I need initial capital for the office space, website development, and marketing materials." She mentioned a figure that made me choke on my water. It was nearly twice what I had given her for the failed jewelry boutique. "That's a substantial investment," I said. "Have you created a business plan? Do you have projections for when you'll break even?" Her expression cooled. "It's all in my head. You know, I understand this market, Rachel. Not everything needs spreadsheets and formal presentations. Actually, for that amount of money, most banks would require detailed documentation, I countered. Well, you're not a bank, she snapped. You're my sister. I thought you'd be supportive. Mom jumped in. Rachel, your sister has wonderful instincts for business. This could be her breakthrough. I felt the familiar pressure building. They expected me to open my wallet again, no questions asked. But this time something felt different. Perhaps it was the weight of years of unacknowledged sacrifices, or maybe it was the confidence from my recent success at work. Before we discuss that further, I said, deciding to share my news. I wanted to let you all know that my team just completed a major project, and my boss is considering me for a director position. There was a brief moment of silence before Mom said, "That's nice, dear." Nice, I repeated. It's a huge accomplishment. I've been working toward this for years. Melissa rolled her eyes. Yes, we know you're perfect at your corporate job, but can we get back to discussing my business? This is important. My career is important too, I insisted, my cheeks flushed with anger. Sure it is, Melissa said with a dismissive wave. But it's just numbers and reports. My business will actually help people. I opened my mouth to respond, but she continued. Besides, it's not like you have anything else going on in your life. No husband, no kids, just work. The table fell uncomfortably silent. Even Greg looked embarrassed by her comment. Melissa, Dad warned, but she was on a roll, leaning forward with a smirk I'll never forget. She asked loudly, "How does it feel being the most useless one here? All that money and success, and what do you have to show for it? At least I'm trying to build something meaningful." Everyone at the table let out uncomfortable laughter except for me. I sat there stunned by the cruelty of her words and the betrayal of my family's response. In that moment something inside me snapped. Years of suppressed frustration crystallized into a clarity I had never experienced before. I placed my napkin beside my plate and looked directly at my sister. My voice was surprisingly steady when I responded. "How does it feel when this useless one stops paying your bills?" The words left my mouth calmly, but they landed like a thunderclap in the dining room. The uncomfortable laughter died instantly. Melissa's smug expression froze, then slowly morphed into confusion. "What are you talking about?" she asked, trying to maintain her composure, but I could see the panic beginning to form behind her eyes. I looked around at each face at the table. My mother's hand had paused midway to her water glass. My father's usual passive expression had transformed into one of concern. Greg was suddenly very interested in his napkin, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. "I'm talking about the $2,200 I transferred to your account every month to cover your mortgage," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I'm talking about the $8,000 I gave you for your jewelry business that failed. I'm talking about the $3,000 last Christmas for your emergency car repair that somehow included a new sound system." Melissa's face flushed red. "That's private, Rachel. I can't believe you're bringing this up at dinner. Why is it private?" Yes. "Are you ashamed of needing help, or just ashamed that everyone might realize how much you've taken from me?" "Taken from you," she sputtered. "You offered. You're my sister. That's what family does." "Yes, family helps each other," I agreed. "But there's a difference between helping and enabling. There's a difference between support and exploitation." Mom finally found her voice. "Rachel, honey, this isn't the time or place for this discussion." I turned to her, feeling a strange calm despite the emotional storm brewing inside me. "When is the time, Mom? When Melissa needs another $10,000 for a business that will fail like all the others? When she and Greg can't make their car payments? When does it become appropriate to point out that I've been financially supporting this family for years while being treated like I have nothing valuable to contribute beyond my wallet?" Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We appreciate everything you do for us, Rachel. You know that." "Do I?" challenged. "Because I just shared news about a major career achievement, and it was dismissed in seconds. Meanwhile, Melissa's half-baked business scheme gets everyone's full attention and support. I turned back to Melissa, who was now glaring at me with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. Do you want to know what it feels like to be called useless by someone whose mortgage you pay? Feels like a betrayal. It feels like years of generosity being thrown back in my face. You're just jealous because I have a family and dreams beyond some corporate ladder, Melissa retorted, but her voice lacked conviction. I have dreams too, I said softly. Dreams that I've put on hold to help everyone in this room. I've delayed buying my own home to help pay for Dad's surgery. I've skipped vacations to cover Mom's medications. I've emptied my savings account more than once to bail you out, Melissa. Greg finally looked up. I didn't know it was that much, he said quietly. Melissa shot him a look that could have melted steel. Stay out of this. No, he should be part of this conversation, I insisted. You two are married. He should know that his lifestyle is being subsidized by his sister-in-law. The room fell into stunned silence again. I could see the reality of the situation slowly dawning on my parents' faces. They had never asked about the extent of my financial support, perhaps not wanting to know the details. Rachel, we never meant to take advantage, Mom said, her voice trembling slightly. I know you didn't, I replied, softening my tone. But intention doesn't change impact. For years, I felt like an ATM rather than a daughter or sister. Today, being called useless after all I've sacrificed was the final straw. I stood up from the table, surprising even myself with this action. I love all of you, but I can't do this anymore. I can't keep giving endlessly while receiving nothing but dismissal and disrespect in return. You're overreacting, Melissa said, but there was fear in her eyes now. It was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive. It wasn't a joke to me, I replied. And starting today, my financial support isn't a guarantee anymore. It's time for all of us to reassess this family dynamic. Mom reached for my hand. Please don't leave like this. Let's talk about it. We've had years to talk about it, Mom. Instead, we've all pretended this arrangement was normal and sustainable. It's not. I gathered my purse and jacket, feeling a strange mixture of terror and liberation. Never in my life had I confronted my family this way. My heart was pounding, but my resolve remained firm. I need some time, I said, moving toward the door. Please respect that. Dad called after me. Rachel, wait. I paused at the doorway, turning back to look at the tableau of shocked faces. I'm not abandoning anyone. I just need space to figure out what healthy boundaries look like for me, for all of us. As I walked to my car, I could hear Melissa's raised voice through the open window, already spinning the narrative to make herself the victim. The familiar pattern was attempting to reassert itself, but something had fundamentally changed. Me. Tears blurred my vision as I drove home, but they weren't entirely tears of sadness. There was relief there, too, and a tentative sense of freedom. For the first time in years, I had spoken my truth regardless of the consequences. I had no idea what would happen next, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Things could never go back to the way they were before. Whether my family realized it or not, everything had changed the moment I decided to value myself as much as I had always valued them. The first week after the confrontation at dinner was both liberating and excruciating. My phone buzzed constantly with messages and missed calls from every member of my family. Mom sent tearful voicemails begging me to call back. Dad's texts were brief but frequent, asking if I was okay. Melissa alternated between angry accusations and attempts to normalize the situation as if nothing had happened. I read everything but responded to nothing. For once in my life, I was putting myself first. The morning after the dinner, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My boss was understanding, having noticed my exhaustion following our big project completion. I spent the day in my apartment, alternating between crying and experiencing unexpected moments of relief. It felt like I had put down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for so long that I'd forgotten it wasn't naturally part of me. By the second day, I had developed a self-care routine that helped me process my emotions. Morning walks in the park near my apartment, journaling my thoughts without censorship, long hot baths with the expensive bath oils I usually saved for special occasions. Small acts of kindness toward myself that I had rarely prioritized before. On the third day, I called Dr. Bennett, a therapist I had seen briefly 2 years ago when work stress had triggered anxiety attacks. She had an opening the following afternoon, and I took it without hesitation. "It sounds like you've reached a breaking point," Dr. Bennett observed after I recounted the dinner incident. Her office was as calming as I remembered, with soft lighting and comfortable furniture that invited honesty. "I think I reached it years ago but ignored all the warning signs," I admitted. "That's common in family dynamics like yours," she explained. "The financially stable member often becomes locked in a provider role that grows increasingly imbalanced over time." "I don't mind helping my family," I clarified. "I love them. I want them to be okay." "There's a difference between helping and enabling," Dr. Bennett replied, echoing the words I had used at dinner. "Healthy boundaries don't mean abandoning your family. They mean creating relationships based on mutual respect rather than dependency." We spent the hour discussing practical strategies for establishing boundaries. No more automatic financial transfers, clear communication about what I was willing and unwilling to do, and expectations of respect and reciprocity in our relationships. "This won't be easy," Dr. Bennett warned. "Your family has grown accustomed to the current dynamic. Change will be met with resistance. They already think I'm being selfish and dramatic," I sighed. "Setting healthy boundaries often looks like selfishness to those who have benefited from their absence," she said, giving me one of the most validating insights I had ever received. I left the session with a clearer mind and a tentative plan for moving forward. That evening I met my coworker Jessica for dinner. We had grown closer during the intensive work on our recent project, and she was one of the few people who understood both my professional drive and my personal struggles. "I've been worried about you," she admitted as we settled into a booth at our favorite restaurant. "You haven't responded to any messages in the group chat." "I've been dealing with some family drama," I explained, then found myself sharing the entire story. Jessica listened without interruption, her expression shifting between shock and sympathy. "Rachel, I had no idea you were carrying all of that," she said when I finished. "No wonder you've seemed stressed, even after our project succeeded." "I've gotten good at compartmentalizing," I said with a weak smile. "Too good maybe," she observed. "You know what strikes me about this situation? You're always the one giving. When was the last time anyone in your family gave something to you? Not just money but time, attention, support." The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to respond but realized I couldn't recall a recent example. My birthday last year had passed with just perfunctory phone calls. When I had been considered for my previous promotion, only Dad had remembered to ask about the outcome. My family knew very little about my daily life, my friends, or my dreams beyond work. "That's what I thought," Jessica said gently, noting my silence. "Relationships should go both ways, R.A. You deserve better than being treated like the family bank." Her validation strengthened my resolve to maintain the boundaries I was establishing. I returned home feeling more confident in my decision to step back and reassess my role in my family. That confidence was tested the next day when Melissa showed up unannounced at my apartment door. I was tempted not to answer, but I knew avoidance would only delay the inevitable confrontation. When I opened the door, I was struck by how disheveled she looked. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep, possibly both. "Finally," she said, pushing past me into the apartment. "Do you have any idea how worried everyone has been? Mom barely slept all week." I closed the door and took a deep breath. "Hello to you too, Melissa. Don't get sarcastic with me," she snapped. "You completely humiliated me at dinner in front of Greg, in front of Mom and Dad. How could you do that to me?" "I didn't plan to have that conversation there," I said calmly. "But you pushed me to my breaking point by calling me useless after years of supporting you financially." "It was a joke," she insisted, throwing her hands up. "You've always been too sensitive." "It wasn't funny," I replied. And this isn't about one comment. It's about years of taking me for granted while dismissing my feelings and accomplishments. Melissa paced my living room, her agitation palpable. So what now? You're just cutting us all off because your feelings got hurt. Real mature, Rachel. I'm not cutting anyone off, I clarified. I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference. Boundaries, she repeated mockingly. Is that what your therapist calls it? Because it looks a lot like punishment from where I'm standing. I felt my resolve wavering, but remembered Dr. Bennett's words about resistance to change. I'm sorry you see it that way. My decision isn't about punishing anyone. It's about creating healthier relationships for all of us. We need your help, Rachel, Melissa said, her voice breaking slightly. The mortgage payment is due next week. Greg's commission check was smaller than expected this month. The familiar guilt began creeping in, but I stood firm. I've made my decision, Melissa. I won't be making any more mortgage payments for you and Greg. So you're just going to let us lose our house? She asked incredulously. You have options, I pointed out. You could sell the house and buy something more affordable. You could get a roommate. You could both take on extra work. These are the kinds of solutions most adults would consider before asking their sibling to pay their bills indefinitely. Her expression hardened. I always knew you were jealous of me. This proves it. This isn't about jealousy, I said wearily. This is about me finally recognizing my own worth and refusing to be taken advantage of anymore. Our conversation continued in circles for nearly an hour, with Melissa cycling through guilt trips, accusations, and occasional moments of seeming understanding before reverting to anger. When she finally left, I felt emotionally drained but still certain I was making the right choice. 2 days later, my parents showed up. Their visit was less confrontational than Melissa's, but equally aimed at restoring the status quo. Mom cried. Dad appealed to my sense of family loyalty. I listened respectfully but maintained my position. I love you both, I told them as they were leaving. That hasn't changed. But the way we relate to each other needs to change. We just want our family back together, Mom said tearfully. I want that too, I assured her. But not the way it was before. We deserve better than that. All of us. As they drove away, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and hope. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, I could see the possibility of authentic relationships with my family rather than transactional ones. 2 weeks after the fateful dinner, my phone rang with Melissa's ringtone. I hesitated before answering, wondering what new tactics she might employ to get money from me. But something in me sensed this call was different. Rachel, her voice cracked as soon as I answered. I don't know what to do. The panic in her tone was unmistakable. My protective instincts immediately kicked in despite everything that had happened. What's wrong? I asked, already reaching for my car keys. It's the final notice for our electricity, she said, her words tumbling out rapidly. They're going to shut it off tomorrow if we don't pay. I tried everything. Greg asked his boss for an advance, but they're having cash flow issues. I called all my friends but no one can help. The credit cards are maxed out. I even tried applying for a payday loan, but we don't qualify because of our credit scores. My heart sank. This was exactly the type of emergency that had prompted me to send money in the past. The thought of my sister sitting in a dark house with no power was painful, but I also recognized the pattern we were at risk of falling back into. I'm sorry you're in this situation, I said carefully. Have you contacted the utility company about a payment plan? They want half of what we owe up front, she replied. It's $843. Rachel, please, just this once. I promise I'm trying to get things under control. I closed my eyes, fighting the internal battle between compassion and enabling. Melissa, I know this is hard, but my answer is still no. I believe you can figure this out without my financial intervention. The line went silent for a moment before she responded, her voice cold. Fine, I guess we'll just sit in the dark then. Thanks for nothing. She hung up before I could respond. I sat holding my phone, second-guessing my decision. Was I being too harsh? Was this really about boundaries, or was I punishing my sister for hurting my feelings? I called Dr. Bennett's office and was fortunate to get a brief phone consultation. "You're doing the right thing," she assured me after I explained the situation. "This is precisely how patterns of financial dependency are broken. It's uncomfortable and even painful in the short term, but necessary for long-term change." "But what if they really can't pay their bill?" "Yes. Then they will experience the natural consequences of their financial decisions," she explained. "That experience, while difficult, is how adults learn to manage money responsibly." Her words made sense intellectually, but emotionally I was still struggling. After our call, I distracted myself with work, staying late at the office to avoid sitting alone in my apartment with my thoughts. The next morning, I received a group text from my mother. "Dad in hospital, not serious, but please come." My heart raced as I called her immediately. "What happened?" "His blood pressure spiked," Mom explained. "The doctor says it's probably stress-related. He's going to be fine, but they want to keep him for observation." "I'm on my way," I said, already gathering my things. The hospital was across town and traffic was heavy. By the time I arrived, Melissa was already there, sitting beside Mom in the waiting area. The tension was palpable as I approached. "How is he?" I asked, directing my question to Mom. "Stable," she replied. "The doctor just went in to check on him again." I nodded and took a seat across from them. Melissa avoided making eye contact. "Did they get your electricity situation sorted out?" I asked her quietly. She looked up, surprised by my question. "Greg's parents loaned us the money," she replied stiffly. "They weren't happy about it, but they helped." I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief that they had found a solution and validation that other resources had been available all along. The doctor emerged and assured us that Dad was responding well to medication. His blood pressure was returning to normal ranges, and they expected to release him tomorrow. We were allowed to visit him one at a time. Mom went first, then Melissa. When my turn came, I found Dad looking tired but alert in his hospital bed. "You didn't need to rush over here," he said as I took the chair beside him. "It's just a little blood pressure issue." "Of course I came," I replied, squeezing his hand. "You scared us." He sighed heavily. "Been a stressful couple of weeks." "I know," I acknowledged. "I'm sorry if my actions contributed to that." Dad was quiet for a moment, looking more thoughtful than I had seen him in years. "Your mother went to get coffee," he said suddenly, "and Melissa's probably in the cafeteria by now." I nodded, unsure where he was going with this. "I want to tell you something while it's just us," he continued. "Something I should have said years ago." I waited, feeling a strange anticipation. "I've known things weren't right," he admitted, his voice low. "The way Melissa relies on you. The way your mother and I have come to expect your help without really acknowledging everything you do for us." I blinked back sudden tears. "Dad, no. Let me finish," he insisted. "I was raised to believe a man provides for his family. When my back got bad and I couldn't work the hours I used to, it hit me hard. Then you stepped in, so capable and generous. I told myself it was temporary, just until I got back on my feet. But temporary became permanent, and it was easier to accept your help than to face the reality that I couldn't be the provider anymore." "You'll always be my dad," I said softly. "That's worth more than any financial support." "Maybe so," he replied. "But I let my pride keep me from seeing what was happening with Melissa. Your sister has never had to face consequences. Your mother and I spoiled her, and then you picked up where we left off. That's not your fault. It's ours." His candor stunned me. In all our years of family dynamics, this was the most honest conversation we had ever had. "What do we do now?" "Yes. We start over," he said.